Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Sketchy Ideas, the live point counterpoint video podcast debate show where we illustrate, talk about things surrounding business, leadership, personal development, movies, how great Michael is, how awesome our producer is, and how awful I am sometimes. The point of this show is to talk about things that you discover on the internet. And we want to make sure you think twice before you start implementing willy-nilly. All right. Hi, I'm Brad James.
And I'm Michael Rampola.
And we are your hosts. And today, we're going to dive into some tools that I know are really, really helpful for a lot of people that I work with, and how they can build frameworks to talk about the stuff that they do. But before we dive into that, I want to give a shout out to the organizations that are making this show happen. So first one, go ahead, Michael.
Sketchy Ideas is powered by Spirity. Spirity helps business owners overcome the obstacles to achieve a greater success. If you have been working really hard and you have a clear vision for the future, but you're still not quite where you know you want to be and know where you need to be, Spirity can help you get there. We'll help you figure out what it is that's holding you back and create a roadmap and the building blocks to help you get to that ultimate success. Spirity.
And our second sponsor is Cream City Marketing. We help medium and small and even some really large businesses build systems around marketing and sales to help them grow both their business as well as maybe recruitment or otherwise, right? So we do traditional and digital marketing in a whole bunch of different realms, from strategy to actually implementation all the way. So if you've got questions, go to creamcitymarketing.com and find out some more information there. All right, so let's dive into this, all right? Michael, before the show, you and I were talking about the best way to introduce this, because you and I work with a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of great leaders in businesses, and a lot of CEOs and executives across big companies. And I don't know about you, but I always find that they're looking for processes or they're looking for ways to package information on how to do things, but they don't really have a way to do it. Have you dealt with that?
Absolutely. And I think what's common is they don't know what it is that they're lacking, but they know they're missing something. There's something between the vision I'm trying to articulate or the goal I'm trying to achieve and the day-to-day execution that drives me towards that. And there's some level of abstraction, some gap in between that is a struggle to close or a struggle to clarify. And what they're looking for is a framework, is a process that helps take the big to the small, and it's hitting that middle ground that often they're struggling with. They don't even realize that that's what they're lacking, but something like a simple framework or a defined process could help them get there.
Yeah, like I imagine thinking about all the people who are like, I want to make sure my team understands how we do this one thing, or I want to make sure my customers or clients understand the different pieces of how to solve a problem that we're solving. And so frameworks, all right, frameworks are a simplified version of maybe standard operating procedures in your business or solutions that you're offering customers and clients in a way that they can understand and remember and potentially teach or reteach or share with somebody else, okay? So a lot of people consider frameworks to be totally a marketing term. And I promise you, it's not just a marketing term. If you recall, if you've been following us, when we've talked about things like content, or we've talked about navigating the 4 C's of business, or we talk about maybe implementing sales funnels or sales cycles, all of those things are frameworks that Michael and I teach our clients and customers so that they can better understand why we're implementing solutions or how the pieces of those solutions fit together to solve a bigger problem. Does that sound about right? Did I hit that? All right.
Yeah, square on that. Absolutely.
Mike, I'm double checking on Michael since Michael took a week vacation off last week. So we're trying to get him back in the game.
I just, I went and sat on a beach somewhere. That was my week.
You heard it right here. Michael was on a beach somewhere.
I've been hoodwinked. I think you're absolutely right, Brad. And I was starting to get a picture as you were, describing that about it's the part in the middle that's fuzzy. It's in a cloud. It's maybe in a little bit of a fog between where I am and where I'm trying to go. And I think you made a really important point, which is it's not just about what happens in the middle. It's can that go beyond the people in it? Can it be taught? Can it be used to sell? Can it be shared with others? And if it can't, it's probably not yet a framework.
Correct. Yep. Exactly.
I think it's one of the key hallmarks of a framework is that, let me just start to kind of build an idea here. If it is a framework, it is therefore, I'm hearing easy. I'm just going to go easy to share, which also implies easy to explain, to teach, etc. If it can go beyond the person who owns it, knows it, through the next person to a third tier, you've got a framework. Does that sound about right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
All right. What are some of the other hallmarks of a good framework in your mind?
It allows you to scale. I mean, that's when we talk about the why frameworks are important. Frameworks allow you to reproduce cycles and processes for others, which takes time and effort off of your plate, right? So frameworks have an end goal, as you talked about, and made, like, that's why you planted that flag on the top of the mountain. Those end goals are so important to understand. Hey, we don't just create frameworks for the sake of it. The framework, beginning and an end, if it's a cycle, there's a reason, right? There's an end goal to it, right? And the other thing I want to make sure people understand is frameworks don't necessarily have to be so focused on exactly what you sell or what you're trying to get across. What you do might be a piece of a bigger framework. So, for example, Michael, I want to talk about, you guys focus, you've got a framework on how to get people to work towards self-improvement. Right. And the reason you work towards that self-improvement in larger companies is because based on science, facts, data, et cetera, where if most of the people are working on self-improvement, guess what? The company tends to also improve in a number of different ways, both revenue, bottom line, operations, buy-in, a whole bunch of different metrics that we don't have to go into. But that's like a piece of a larger framework that you're trying to get across to those types of clients. I'll use another example. In Beepods, when we talk about the Beepods beekeeping system and the hive and the equipment are one piece of the framework. There are other pieces such as education and training, support. Then we dig into outreach tools and we talk about data. And then we talk about leveraging the data to iterate on the philosophy, which feeds into the equipment, which feeds into the training, right? Those are the pieces of that framework. And we typically supply most of those pieces, but we don't necessarily have to supply all of them, right? So when you're talking about frameworks in a marketing or a sales sense, you can talk about leveraging, for example, if you sell a piece of software, that piece of software hopefully helps you to achieve a significant piece of a bigger framework, right? Like QuickBooks is not a framework on its own. QuickBooks is a tool to accelerate a framework and is a significant piece of what QuickBooks promotes, but they sell QuickBooks as a software to execute on accounting or bookkeeping or payroll or a whole bunch of other stuff. Does that make sense?
It does. What I'm pulling out from there, I love it. What I'm pulling out from there is a framework operates across context, which means it can be this framework is actually a part of other frameworks, or it helps me connect to different domains or ideas. So a framework brings things together and operates in both a middle space, can either operate in a middle space or a meta space, but it has an important function across the context. The other thing I heard you say was the whole point about continuous improvement, reusability. It's repeatable and measurable. If it is not repeatable and measurable, it is not yet a framework.
Mm-hmm.
If it only works once, it's not a framework. If there's no way to measure whether or not it's working, not a framework. Is that about right?
That sounds good. Yeah, I think that's something that, and that's like for advanced. If you've gotten to a point where you're running frameworks and you've ran it a couple times, now begin to measure it, right? Like, right. You know, and an easy one to talk about with that is if you have a sales process, right? There are different metrics around that sales process that you can talk about and measure with numbers. I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about numbers, right? Like it's very different. When we talked last week, we talked about the scientific method. In the scientific method, that is a form of a framework, but Absolutely. That framework is applied in a whole bunch of different ways. If there are any scientists watching this, they know that the scientific method is like, that's level 1.
Yep. There's a framework of frameworks right there, right? I mean, the scientific method is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's so, in a good way, it's so big and universally reapplicable. I think it has all the right hallmarks of a good framework.
Yeah, and it's honestly approached. If you struggle with this in your business, reflect on how you were taught that, and if you had a quality teacher, you should be able to pull back and go, okay, I can begin to look at the scientific method and go, cool, I'll break it out piece by piece by piece. And then, for example, experimental design, that's a whole nother separate piece of the framework. And within that, you might have multiple different pieces of the framework. So there are frameworks of frameworks of frameworks across the board, right? Mm-hmm. The goal of a framework is to be able to explain complex challenges or processes in a way that somebody at the end of the day will understand themselves and be able to either tell back and explain back to you or share with somebody else and be close to the end goal.
Which I like, and I don't know I'm going to put it in these terms. I'm going to say it's recognizable. And what I mean by that is, mm-hmm. once I learn that framework or understand that framework, I will see it elsewhere. I'll get the Bader-Meinhof effect where it's like, oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. Because I understand, it teaches there, okay, it's recognizable, partly because I'm going to also venture, I'm going to say it's principle, which I think also is another way to say some of the things we said earlier, which is it goes across different contexts and domains, It's easily recognizable when it shows up elsewhere because it's based on things that are true beyond one single use case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
I think, yeah, if it's more rule and less exception, I think we're into a framework. If it's all about exceptions, then I don't think you're at a framework.
Now you're talking about anomalies because frameworks are not meant to necessarily deal with every single possibility. They're not supposed to be like, if you're working in a business where you're trying to go down to dotted I's and cross T's on every single process, awesome, right? Like you should be running super efficiently across the board, but 9 times out of 10, if you're doing that and you're a one-person show, you're going to struggle to grow. Now, I'm not saying that's not helpful. I'm just saying it can cause you a lot of strife when you're looking at where your time is spent. So I've been there. Friends, I've been there.
Yeah.
There's a time like I want you all to know, like I have a folders and folders of processes and standard operating procedures that talks about detailed things across all the businesses. So in Beepods, there's one that I've got an admin process folder that just talks about how to manage the office and leverage printers, specific printers.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a nerd when it comes to this, man. Come on. I love process. I love frameworks.
It's a printer.
Yeah, I know. But do you know how much? Never mind.
No, I do know. I'm giving you a hard time because I don't. I've actually been there. I was drawing it out for fun. All right. So here's I've got some. It is not. Frameworks are not single use. They're not full of exceptions. Mm-hmm. Frameworks are not flowchart.
Correct.
Flowcharts are not framework unless it is just the happy path, which is not actually a flowchart. Like here's what it looks like. The general rule. Okay, but if there's any if and then maybe yes nos, you're too
Mhm.
far, you're too deep. An
Mhm.
SOP is
Yep.
not, the SOP itself is not a framework. Creating what is an SOP might be a framework, but the SOP itself is not the framework, which
Correct.
is a little bit nuanced, but I think an
Yeah.
important distinction, right?
Yes.
It is not, it's also then not, I mean, it's not the instructions.
No, but there can be instructions, right? So again, looking back at how when we talk about building frameworks and how we explain them to people, part of
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and business owners, when they're selling stuff, all of that stuff might be pieces of different points of your framework. But again, the framework, when you with your mountain, right? The framework essentially is explaining the map in simple terms so that you know exactly which switchbacks you need to take to get to the flag at the top of the mountain, right?
Got it.
Like
Right.
it's putting it out there in basic terms in a way that you can understand and share with the guy behind you or the person behind you to go, hey, this is how that you do it. This is where it goes. Here's the general idea. Walk through it, repeat it back to me so that when you're out there on your own, you can do it again on your own, right? Like, and I think, I guess for me, the reason this is so important right now is having talked to a lot of different people in the last year. A lot of people are struggling with this because so many organizations used to have, you're all in the same room. And
Right.
even though we're beginning to move out of this arena, you're still not always going to be able to be in the same room to walk over to somebody's computer screen and walk them through it. So if you
Sure.
have general frameworks and those general frameworks help you internally, right, with like an ethos, you're building problem solving, you're building general direction and maintaining the North Star while helping somebody be able to figure out how to maneuver the small little detailed thing that they keep having a problem with, right? I mean, to me, that's a huge deal. Now,
I agree.
the challenge I know for a lot of people is great. So I know what it is. How do I build them, right? So in the next 5 minutes or so, Michael and I are going to walk through some bigger picture stuff. And we talk about, Michael brought up prior, he's like, wait, so you've got these result driven things that are about, hey, I've got a problem. Now I need to create a framework to solve the problem. And I was like, yeah, but you also have the internal stuff, right? Of like, you probably are doing frameworks. You just don't realize it. And you've been trying to figure out how to scale it to some other people inside of your organization or your VAs or your team member who lives across the planet or wherever. And so today, I think, Michael, you wanted to do the results driven one. Tell me if I'm wrong. It's okay if I am. I'm wrong a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not. Okay, good. Good.
You're good.
So
Yeah. So
Michael,
yeah.
tell us explain to us in high level, what are the different pieces of that framework?
Sure. So if you're building a framework that's like what we're talking about here, the highest level of how to do it. We'll get some color in here. So how to do it, because I don't want to lose these ideas to point back to them in a minute. So how to do it.
Also,
so
we have a better artist. We have a better artist this week, just for all of you. So pictures will be much clearer.
Yeah, number one is gather the information. It's probably going to be too much. So then once you've gathered the information, I'm going to say categorize it. Basically go a level up. Categorize it, group it together, pick all of those little post-its, so to speak, and find the themes. And the fewer, the better. You're getting closer to a framework if you can. The fewer groupings you get, which means you might even have another grouping even bigger than that one. But gather the information, start to categorize. Number two is then organize by relationship. Define what is the relationship between these categories. What is the relationship between these categories? Are they sequential? Are they related? Are they causational? Are they just correlated? What is the relationship between these categories? And then you want to define the function of the framework. Is it designed to help us clarify a message, achieve a goal, solve a problem. Once you have the information, you understand the relationship between the categories, and you know then the function of the framework itself, then you can, organize by, what do I want to call this? Organize the way that, I didn't really organize, lost my terminology for a second here. Define the function of the framework and then create, I'm going to say the story. What I mean
Yeah,
by
we talked
that
about
is,
naming it, right?
Yeah,
putting it
exactly.
into simple terms, so that it makes it relatable, right?
Exactly.
This is where the sales of it, even internally, right? You still have to sell it, and part of selling,
So true.
even
So
internal,
true.
especially internally, is about making it relatable to the people you're trying to get bought in. Because if they don't get bought in, guess what? It's not going to probably make it that far unless you're going to be a micromanager. And that's,
if you have to micromanage it, it's not a framework. If you have to micromanage it, it's not a framework. It doesn't fit because it's not easy to share. If it needs a person to carry it around and explain it all the time, it's not a framework. It should kind of explain itself. I mean,
Yeah,
really, I think that
it should.
It should. Yeah, that's the whole easy to share thing. Simple, clear, memorable. Great stories are that. Great stories are simple, clear, memorable, easy to share, easy to understand, and reshare. And that's why, and I'm liking this story idea because I think it really aims to a lot of these other ideas. I can tell that story again and again, right? Take your basic story frame, the hero's journey. The hero's journey, great framework, great example of a framework, infinitely reapplicable, easy enough to understand. I see it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's a great example of a framework. All of those different parts of that story, like they now, when you take them and relate them and simplify them, then you see that they become a cycle and now you turn it into a circle. And then that visual is key to understanding how that journey works. That's the relationship and the function piece about understanding frameworks. And I think, let me put it this way. Brad, you've seen lots of examples of frameworks gone wrong, right?
Yes.
All right. And I'll tell you where I saw them most often. And when I think if I'm going to graph this, where I would see the greatest influx of bad, broken frameworks. It's when PowerPoint created SmartArt.
Yeah,
in the year
when
PowerPoint created SmartArt.
What year was that, Mr. Brian?
Brian's going to do the research. Thanks, producer. That I would posit with a hypothesis and a lot of anecdotal evidence that is when I saw the greatest proliferation of bad frameworks. Because I've got my information in bullets, pretty easy to understand, but now I'm going to make it visual. And I'm going to pick a visual, and the visuals, this is the squint test. You might have heard of the squint test. The squint test is I can stand back and I take the words away and I squint at it, and the way that the visual is laid out still tells me enough of the right story. The question was, when did PowerPoint create the SmartArt function? When was the SmartArt function put into PowerPoint? 20, yeah, there you go. So whatever that was, because that's when people, and I've seen this, I go,
there's a question, was it before or after Clippy?
It was definitely after Clippy. Clippy was already in the retirement community, I think, by the time SmartArt came out. Anyway, because people would pick a visual, and a visual tells a story, it demonstrates a relationship between different ideas. But if I haven't been thoughtful about what is the information I have, what are the categories of the information I have, what is the relationship between it? If I've just got a sequence of bullets and they all have the same level of value, they're all level 1 index, and I throw that into a SmartArt, I'm going to say a story about the relationship between those pieces of information that might not be true and might just confuse the framework and actually make it a non-framework, or again, just a really bad example of a framework implement.
Yeah, and a word of caution, right? I think we went through a whole bunch of good stuff today. I don't want anybody watching this to be concerned with having it be perfect the first time you put it out there. Okay. Yep. Like if you were watching last week, we talked about content. Okay. We now live in an age where almost everything we're creating lives in a digital space. And the nice thing about digital, right? The biggest beneficiary of digital are people who have great ideas in their heads, but have to talk through them and get feedback on them in order to make them better. Okay. 2013. Brian says 2013 is when SmartArt joined PowerPoint.
That feels right.
All right. So
all right.
That feels right. My point is that use your frameworks, build them out, right? Go give a shot at it. If there's anything you take away from today, go and try and take one of the things you implement either in your business or you try to teach your clients and put it into words that they then can teach you back the next week or the next time you talk to them. Like, if you do that, I promise you, they will join you on this journey of creating the quote unquote perfect framework, which doesn't exist. So don't try and make it, but it will help you to get to a point to not only do a lot of things, it will simplify your marketing and sales message. It will simplify your internal training when you bring on new staff or contractors. It will help you with a whole bunch of stuff in terms of time saving. And guess what? One way you can practice them, you guys see us doing it here on this show, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that we are putting out there to you that we're still refining before we even launch things, okay? And part of the reason we do that is because we want feedback on it. We want to know if the people are grasping it. We want to know if the story or the messaging works. We go back, we rewatch some of these videos and go, hey, the language you used around this one part of your framework doesn't make any sense. Why did you say it that way? Or you didn't boil it down to a simple enough context to ensure that somebody understood it. So understand, like, this is an evolution consistently across your business. You're not going to hit it out of the park the first time. If you do, stick with it, right? Like, if it makes sense to your clients and customers, that's a huge deal. Just keep using it over and over and over again. If they don't get it, don't worry. It's not wrong. You probably just haven't defined it, right? That storytelling part of it, that adding the boundaries and the name to it will help you to make it easier. Okay. So with that, I don't know if we've got, did I hit everything? Clippy also was 2013. Ooh.
Wait a minute. Clippy was out in 2013, but he was like, Clippy was also 20. Clippy might have been archived in 2013. So Clippy was replaced by, that's a whole different conversation. All right, I want to grab Brad's last idea, which is share the framework, ask the question, does this make sense? And then have somebody explain it back to you. If it makes sense and they can explain it back to you, and it's close, that's the iterative process. If it's close, good, keep going. If it's off, go back. And when you go back as far into the sequence as you can. Go back to the original information and think about recategorizing, right?
Yep.
If you did that well, the rest of the stuff should follow and flow like good problem solving. Problem well defined is half solved. The solution doesn't solve the problem. Go back to the problem definition. If the framework doesn't tell the right story, go back to the original data. Go back to the original concept and make sure that you've included everything and gotten it to a logical level of categorization, because everything after that should follow and flow from there. That's the framework for frameworks. Thank you.
The framework. All right. Hey, we're just about out of time. So if you have questions on this, drop them in the comments below. Let us know. We'll respond to you, whether it's me or whether it's Michael or whether it's Brian. One of us will get back to you. Again, if you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends, screen cap it, give us a rating on the page, share it with your friends. Go, hey, look at these guys making fools of themselves with their drawing. I'm not sure. Hey, Brian, can you chime in? Did we have a technical difficulty today?
We did not. You can change that to go one.
Hold on. We got minutes to go. Do you want to call it? You really want to jinx it? All right, go for it.
I'm doing it. This is a new tally. Here we go. Look at this. Friends, can I get like a bump-a-da-da?
I'm like waiting for my camera just to start on fire, because we've incited the wrath of the tech gods, I feel like, but maybe we'll be all right.
We're going to end the show quickly. All right. With that being said, if you've got questions, you want to be on the show, hit us up at sketchyideasshow.com. Go there or email us, info@sketchyideasshow.com. Brian will probably get back to you there. Share it with your friends. Hey, and before anything happens, I'm going to say goodbye. We're going to give a shout out to Cream City Marketing and Spirity, and we're going. And just remember, just remember, when you find that sketchy idea on the internet, think twice before you implement it. But just because it's sketchy doesn't mean it's not worth exploring. We'll see you next week. Take care.